Welcome to today's seminar on behalf of EOL and M Cubed. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Bernadett Weinzierl. Dr. Weinzierl obtained her doctorate at the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich. Following her doctoral study, she worked as an aerosol scientist at the German Aerospace Center, DLR. Currently, Bernadett serves as full professor and head of the Aerosol and Environmental Physics Research Group at University of Vienna in Austria. Dr. Weinzierl is an expert in airborne in situ aerosol and cloud measurements and model-supported data analysis. Amongst other accomplishments, Bernadett's work has provided benchmark datasets to mineral dust properties at stages varying from the source to mixing to long-range transport, systematically quantified the effect of pollution on the microphysical and optical properties of Saharan and Arabian dust, revealing significant pollution-dependent changes, and provided analysis of unique measurements of volcanic ash that had proved fundamental to the International Civil Aviation Organization in developing guidelines for protection of aviation against the influences of volcanic ash. Bernadett has coordinated several large-scale airborne field campaigns, including SolTrace and A-Life, and participated in more than 20 international aircraft campaigns, including ATOM, Sabre, FireX, and ACLIP. This summer, she and her team will support the NASA Inspire campaign, which is utilizing the NSF Gulfstream 5. Please join me in welcoming Bernadett for her seminar.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Can you hear me? Okay. It's a great pleasure to be here and talk about measurements we have done in mineral dust. And I've brought here a satellite image of the A-Life campaign where we have been based out of Cyprus, and maybe you can see that here. So in the Eastern Mediterranean to study polluted mineral dust. But before I go into detail, I'm not sure if everyone knows the Vienna aerosol group, so I thought it's maybe interesting to have one slide. So there's a long tradition of aerosol research in Vienna, more than 100 years. And I'm now 10 years in Vienna, and our focus is to look at the basic properties of aerosols and the influence on cloud microphysical properties, but also cloud processes. And we do different kinds of things. To be able to do measurements, you need instrumentation. We buy instrumentation and modify it, but there's also development of instrumentation being done in Vienna. Then besides me, there is another sub-aerosol group of Paul Winkler. He is doing a lot on the small nucleation particle side in the CERN cloud chamber. And so my main focus is the airborne measurements, which I have started at DLR, and I'm continuing for more than 20 years now. And in terms of aerosol types, I have always been interested in black carbon and forest fires, but also chorus mode particles, which typically come from mineral dust storms, but also microplastic is a newer topic where we are interested in Vienna. So the question is, if you have an aerosol group, it's not just for fun, it is for fun, but the question is, why should we actually care about aerosols? So the so-called PM2.5, so particles with an aerodynamic diameter smaller than 2.5 micron, and ground-based ozone top the list of harmful pollutants, being responsible for about 13 premature deaths every minute. So it's aerosol, understanding aerosol and its impact on air quality is very important from a health perspective. Many air pollutants are visible components of the atmosphere. So this is a satellite image over Asia, and you can see the smog, which is here. Then in the middle, it's a photograph from the FireX campaign, where you can see the fires, which emit a lot of trace gases and particles. And on the right, you can see mineral dust in the Caribbean, and there's so much dust there that the interaction with the radiation is so strong that you even don't see the ground. And so coming from this air quality perspective, PM2.5 poses a direct health risk, but the impact of aerosol particles extends far beyond health effects. There's this complex impact on the environment and the climate, and this is what we are most interested in. And so in terms of aerosol particles interaction with the climate, there is two main pathways. One is the impact on the scattering and absorption of solar radiation, which at the ground leads to a cooling, but in the layer, when you have their absorbing particles, can also lead to a warming, which changes the temperature structure of the atmosphere and then has an impact on meteorological processes. The second very important thing of aerosol particles is the impact on water and ice cloud formation and the modification of cloud properties. So this has a feedback on the radiative properties of the clouds, but also on cloud lifetime, rainformation, and many other things. And so in summary, locally, aerosol particles can have a warming or cooling effect depending on particle type. So black carbon is a very strong absorbent and has a strong warming effect. Sulfide particles have a strong cooling effect. And so if we look at the overall effect, the presence of aerosol particles, anthropogenic and natural ones, is compensating part of the warming caused by the greenhouse gases, mainly CO2 and methane. And if we only look at the man-made anthropogenic aerosol particles, global temperature increase would be about 0.5 degrees stronger if we wouldn't have the particles in the air. But on the other hand, there's this dilemma: if we clean up the air, then we remove this masking effect and the warming is becoming more prominent. So we have this dilemma of environmental protection versus climate protection, but I think there is no doubt we want to have clean air quality, and this is why we want to make sure that we cut down emissions of aerosol particles. So I have spoken a lot now about anthropogenic aerosol particles. I would like now to go to a very important natural aerosol, mineral dust. Mineral dust is highly abundant over large regions of the world. About half of the emitted aerosol mass per year is mineral dust. It has a large contribution to the radiative forcing in the short and also in the long wave. So mineral dust, depending on where it is and what the surface underneath is, can also have a warming effect. And there was this very important paper by Koch and his collaborators that dust in the atmosphere is substantially coarser than it has been thought before. So it cools the climate less than predicted, even raising the possibility that dust has a net warming effect. And it can act as a cloud condensation nuclei and effective ice nuclei. And what is also important, mineral dust, as it gets transported, it mixes with other aerosol types. And there the question is, what does this mixing do to the properties of the mineral dust? And when I started with these questions, I was like, you have the mineral dust, it moves across big cities, you take up pollution, and you still have, in terms of optical property, a natural dust signature. But as I will show you in the course of this talk today, it's not like this. And so today I'm going to show you some results from the systematic quantification of the effect of pollution mixing into mineral dust as a function of pollution content in the dust layers. And then at the end, it doesn't have to do with dust, but we have a new aerosol observatory at the University of Vienna, and I would like to show you what we have there and what we might be able to do in the future on this observatory. Okay. Going to this project which funded us, the polluted dust measurements. It was called ALIFE. It was funded by the European Commission in the framework of ERC. And the overall aim was to investigate the properties of aerosol mixtures, in particular mineral dust with black carbon, but if there's black carbon, there's also other pollutants, and to study the impact of the mixing on microphysical, optical, and radiative properties of the dust layers. And so the question was, where do you go if you want to do this kind of measurements? And so the Eastern Mediterranean is like a perfect location for studying dust, because in spring you have Saharan dust transported to the Eastern Mediterranean, but there's also Arabian dust coming. Then you can have fires, and also in Eastern Europe there's still more pollution than in, for example, Northern Europe. So the idea was to go to this melting pot and hope for cooperative weather, which produces a situation where we have this mixed dust layers. And the approach was to fit out the DLR Falcon research aircraft with a suite of aerosol instruments, but also a LiDAR, which gave us some information about where the aerosol layers are, and then also put ground-based measurements. So it was a collaboration with Tropos in Leipzig, but also a lot of other institutions. So we had ground-based measurements and about aerosol size, mixing stage, black carbon mass concentration, and absorption. And then we had the plane, and this is the flight pattern. So typically the Falcon is based in Oberpfaffenhofen. So we did some flights into Austria, we flew some stations, but the dust part was here in the Eastern Mediterranean. And overall we had 22 mission flights, 80 flight hours. And we were really very lucky. So it turned out that just a few months before the campaign, we were told, you cannot go here, you cannot go here, you cannot go here, too dangerous. And so it was like, and but the weather was so nice that the layers were transported to Cyprus. And so we just had to stay near Cyprus to do everything what we wanted to do. And maybe that's also an outlook to campaigns where you are forced to do some compromises, hope for the weather to be cooperative. So we had coordinated overflights of the ground sites. There was the big ground station here in Paphos, but there was also measurements from the Greek groups here in Crete. And so we tried to coordinate the measurements to get many independent parameters to study the entire process. This is 2 photographs of the instrumentation. So the Falcon is typically quite packed if we do a campaign. We had the instrumentation inside the plane for size distribution, optical properties, and cloud condensation nuclei. And then we had measurements at the wing of the aircraft for coarse mode size distribution and cloud properties with different cloud probes, including cups. And so if you do measurements inside a plane, it's clear that you have to suck the aerosol into the plane, and there's a limitation which is posed by or caused by the inlet. And we put a lot of effort to characterize the inlet. And if you want to know more, there's this paper by Manuel Schöberl, who looked at this Falcon aerosol inlet. And as a ballpark number, I can tell you, so inside the cabin, we measure up to 2 microns, depending on density of the particles and also altitude. Okay, now let's go to Cyprus, and I show you here 2 plots of ground-based measurements. The top plot is a time series of dates in April, so this is April 1st, and here we have April 30th, and here's something with the axis is messed. So this is radar measurements on top, and you can see there were situations where there were clouds present, and on the bottom here we have the LiDAR measurements, and you can see we had lots of structure, and overall we had 3 major dust outbreaks, and you can see that in addition to these dust outbreaks, we sometimes had clouds, so it was the perfect situation. So if you do such a campaign, it's not only about getting what you want, you also want to know how usual is what you measure. And so we have looked at A-Life in the context of long-term aerosol optical depth measurements and dust mass statistics using CAMS reanalysis data. And so here you can see the dust optical depth during our campaign period. And the question is now, how did this deviate from other years? And so we looked at 3 parameters. The deviation of the AOD in April 2017 from the deviation of other Aprils in the years 2003 until 2017. And so if you see a red color, then there is more than typically, and if you see a blue color, then there is less than typically. And here we have Cyprus. And so we looked at the AOD, which gives you a column parameter, then also 500 hectopascal and 300 hectopascal dust mass. And so what we can see at all altitudes, we had an enhancement of the presence of Arabian dust, which is really cool because it's not so given that you find the Arabian dust, in particular in the Eastern Mediterranean here during the period in April. And also dust mass in the southern and eastern Mediterranean was also a little bit enhanced in 500 hectopascal, and there was more dust than usual at higher altitudes. If you look at the AOD time series, which I have not given, it's kind of in the ballpark, but with the model you get more accurate judgment. So I told you that we wanted to know how increasing pollution impacts mineral dust properties, but to do so, first you have to classify your data set and decide what is the aerosol type I'm in. And so we spent quite some time to develop an automatic aerosol classification algorithm, which we run through all the data so that you don't pick on accident a case which is biased. And so we distinguished 4 main aerosol types. So we had the FlexPart model running, and from the FlexPart model so we run it backwards from every second in the flight. And so we decided whether the first thing we did is we looked at the coarse mode number concentration, which is a proxy for the presence of dust. But then we also looked if FlexPart classifies a sequence as mineral dust, and then we decided was it coming from Saharan deserts or from Arabian regions. So we came up with 4 main types: Saharan dust, Arabian dust. Then there were cases where FlexPart did not classify it, but we found bigger particles. So in this class you have mineral dust cases which were not detected by FlexPart, but also some sea salt cases. And then the 4th class, we called it mixture with low or no coarse mode. This is typically pollution cases. And then for each of the subclasses, we defined clean or pure Saharan dust, moderately polluted, and polluted. And this was done as a relative fraction. So we looked at the ratio between black carbon mass divided by the number concentration of big particles, because we thought a relative, not a certain mass threshold is the thing. If you have dilution, we looked at the relative contribution of dust versus coarse mode particles. I will come back to this and show you how good this worked. But first of all, I would like to show you a vertical profile of coarse mode number concentration. Coarse mode in this case is defined particles larger than 500 nanometers. And what you can see, we have an enhancement of coarse mode up to, so strong enhancement up to 6-7 kilometers, but also at 10 kilometers altitude, we were finding coarse mode particles. And so in combination to this, for every altitude, we looked which fraction of the measurement time was classified as which type. And so the orange numbers here are Saharan dust, the pink numbers is Arabian dust, the blue mixtures with enhanced coarse mode, and the green is the pollution cases. And what we can see, so typically the Arabian dust was underneath the Saharan dust. Saharan dust was more like in the altitude range 4 kilometers and up. Then we found these mixtures with high coarse mode here because that were sea salt cases, and what we see up here, that's the ones which were not classified by FlexPart. And the green regions here is also cases where we were influenced by pollution. So we came now from a classification which is based on microphysical properties. The question is now, if you look at chemical composition of the particles, does this give us some agreement with this classification scheme? And so what we did, not for every sequence, but for selected sequences, we were collecting particles on the plane, and Konrad Kandler and his group at the Technical University of Darmstadt looked at the chemical composition. And here you can see the result. Again, the 4 classes. Orange means that you have that's the fraction of mineral dust, and what we can see in each main class, as you go from pure to polluted, the fraction or the relative frequency of the presence of dust decreases, and then other stuff like the black stuff, which is carbon-dominated particles, or the yellow one, which is sulfate, increases. And so for this class, we didn't have any samples, but you can see that the chemical composition data confirm our classification scheme, that the relative contribution of dust decreases as we go from pure to polluted cases. the people in Darmstadt also had looked at the dust particles itself, and this is the next plot I'm showing to you. So what is the composition of the mineral dust here? And this is shown in this plot. So most of the particles are made of silicates, but there were also carbonites and illites and some kaolinite, and a little bit, really small contributions of feldspar. And through the classes, you could see that the composition was rather consistent, which is also what you would expect if the source is the same, that the dust particles composition does not change as you go through the three subclasses, but you just add more pollutants. So one question we run a lot into it that people were asking us, is it actually an internal or an external mixture of aerosol, what you see? And so we did not have the time to look at all the samples we had because it came up in the review process of Marilena's paper here. So we took 3 randomly selected samples which represent the pure, the moderately polluted, and the polluted class. And what we see is, we do see core shell mixtures where you have the black carbon core and the sulfide, the black carbon core and the sulfide shell. We do see mixtures of mineral dust and sulfide particles. There's pure mineral dust particles. And here we have the soot particles in the core shell form and the dust particles separate. So we basically, or most of the time, have external mixtures and not stuff which is like sticking together. And here is a dust case where black carbon case where you can see the fractal dimension of the particles. And so this was the size range smaller than 500 nanometer. And on to the right, we have data from the ESIM, which shows the non-spherical dust particles here. Okay, the first question I would now like to ask is, what is the impact of the pollution on the size distribution? And so I took all the cases which were classified as pure Arabian dust and average size distribution, moderately polluted, and so on, and did this for all the classes. And I'm now going to show you the case for the Arabian dust. And so the colors are now in the following plots always. If the color is blue, it's the clean case. If the color is orange, then it's the moderately polluted case. And if the color is red, it's the polluted case. And we do see that in all these cases, you have bigger particles. But as you go from clean to polluted, this mode in the fine mode shows up, which I think is not a surprise because anthropogenic particles are small. But it's nice to see it very consistent that as you go to more polluted conditions, the number concentration of smaller particle increases while the big particles still are there. And so it's hard to just look at a plot, which is a log-log plot, so with diameter here, dn d log dp here. So we calculated effective diameters. And so the dashed lines are the effective diameters for the 3 classes. And what you can see, the effective diameter decreases with increasing pollution content, which is also not a surprise seeing this size distribution, but I was surprised that it is such a clear picture. So I have shown you here only Arabian dust. We have done this for all the classes. Effective diameter here on the y-axis, and then the Saharan dust class, the Arabian dust class, mixture with enhanced coarse mode, and mixture with low coarse mode. And for all the cases, so these numbers here are the number of size distribution measurements which we had for averaging. And so you can see the picture is very consistent. In every case, when you go from clean to more polluted, the effective diameters decrease. And so now the question is, we do see a very clear signal and trend for the microphysical properties, what is actually happening for the optical properties. And so there's this paper out and it was published last year, so 2025 is the right year. Intensive optical properties as a function of pollution content, and I'm now going to show you 6 different parameters. The scattering angstrom exponent, which is often used, it's the wavelength dependency of the scattering coefficient. It's often used to classify aerosol types in the in situ world, and I'm showing you in a minute that you shouldn't do this alone. You need other parameters too. The absorption angstrom exponent, the single scattering albedo angstrom exponent, the asymmetry parameter, which tells something about the presence of small and large particles, single scattering albedo and shortwave direct radiative effect. And in the 6 plots I'm going to show, from the left to the right, pollution increases. And what we have plotted here is the ratio of the mass of black carbon divided by the ratio of the mass of supermicron particles. And the 2 different colors here are Arabian and mineral dust, and I think it's really striking that you have this really clear trend in all of the parameters. So single scattering angstrom exponent goes up as pollution increases. Absorption angstrom exponent goes down, so particles get more absorbing, which is also not a surprise if you mix in more black carbon. The asymmetry parameter goes down because you mix in more smaller particles. The single scattering albedo also goes down, and the angstrom exponent of the single scattering albedo goes up. And for the shortwave radiative effect, it's not as clear, which is also not a surprise because you have 2 competing processes. So aerosol gets more absorbing as you have more pollution in it, but you also have smaller particles, and then it depends how the size distribution actually is, what dominates. And so in summary, all intensive aerosol optical properties change significantly with increasing pollution. The presence of the mineral dust masks the dust signal. So typically, a scattering angstrom exponent of 0 is expected for mineral dust, and a scattering angstrom exponent of 2 is expected for pollution. What was also a little bit surprising that we do not see a statistically significant difference between the Saharan and Arabian dust properties. There's a little bit of difference. And also good to have in mind increasing pollution, although we define polluted by using the black carbon mass, increasing pollution not only means enhanced refractory black carbon, but also increased fine mode number concentration. And so now in the next slide, I'm condensing all this information I have shown you here in this busy plot. Again, in this plot you already have seen with the effective diameter, here the scattering angstrom exponent, absorption angstrom exponent, and single scattering albedo. And you can again see this very clear trend if we cluster in these 3 groups. As you go from clean to polluted, you see these very significant changes. And also to have in mind, I told you on the previous slide, it is expected for pure dust that the scattering angstrom exponent is 0. And for the pure dust cases, we do see this. I also told you that the scattering angstrom exponent for pollution is 2, but what we see for the Arabian and Saharan dust cases, so the signal of the natural dust approaches the signal of a pollution as we mix in more and more pollution in the dust layers. So it's actually not that the natural signature is contained, but that by mixing in the anthropogenic aerosol, you get a more anthropogenic signal in the optical properties. So I think I have said all of this. And the last case now is an aerosol cloud interaction case I would like to show you. We were really lucky. So that's now analysis from 3 publications. This is a figure from Max Dollner's cloud indicator paper. It was the flight where we flew from Cyprus to Crete. And we were crossing this area here. So you can see the dust already with your eye here. There was much more. And so in this region, there was dust and also clouds. And we were really lucky that we were in situ measuring the formation of clouds. And so I would now like to zoom into this sequence here and show you attenuated backscatter from the LiDAR measurements in Crete, in Finucalia. So the greenish part here, it's the dust extending up to 8 kilometers or maybe even more. And then you can see here the clouds which were inside the dust layer. And so we were flying up and down through this layer here. So our flight started somewhere here and ended somewhere here. And this is now a vertical profile which corresponds to those measurements here of particle number concentration larger than 5 micron. And color-coded, we have the result of our cloud indicator product, which distinguishes outside of cloud from what we call aerosol cloud transition regime and mixed phase temperature regime. So you can see we are here in the mineral dust layer. There is already some parts where we are going from mineral dust to activated droplets, and then we have here the area with the clouds, which is also consistent what was seen on the LiDAR. And then if we zoom here into the cloud layer, then you can see these beautiful ice crystals. And what also should be kept in mind, we are here at temperature of 260 degrees. So this is really warm temperatures for having ice crystals present. And in this flight, there was even a more interesting, so we found basically two things. This mixed phase clouds, which showed frozen conditions already at very high temperatures. But we were also flying, and so this is 3 time series here. The colors here, again, everything which is purple is classified as mixed phase temperature regime. Blue would be cirrus clouds, dark blue liquid, and then aerosol cloud transition regime. And you can see also the liquid water content. And now I show you a color-coded size distribution. So we go from 1 micron to about, I think, 900 micron. And color-coded is the number concentration. And what you can see, we have these periods where you see something growing like a banana in nucleation plots. And this is the phases where we really measured in situ when the dust activated to clouds. And I now would like to zoom into this period here. So here we have a period where we were outside of the cloud. So I will show you a size distribution measured outside of the cloud. And then I will show you 3 size distribution in blue where we were inside of the cloud, and you really could see how these particles grow. And this is a paper we are in the submission process, so I need to upload the manuscript tomorrow. We already registered it at ACPD. And so we do have in red the mineral dust size distribution, and then we have the different times here where you can start to see that you grow this second mode here, which is the activated dust particles, which are then there and form this bigger mode. I think this is really cool, and I'm not sure if there's so many measurements where you really saw this process going on while you were flying with the plane. Okay, this is the highlights I wanted to show you from the A-Life project. I would now like to switch to our aerosol observatory. So in 2019, there was a lot of discussion whether we should have some continuous measurements. And I have to admit, I refused it started 2016, and I refused for 3 years. And then I was like, yeah, maybe it's not such a good idea not to have the opportunity to be part of the ACTRIS community, as we are the only university in Austria who teaches aerosol physics. And so we planned a laboratory at the top of our roof. There was something, but everything which is here in blue and red is stuff which has been built. And so this is now how it looks now. We have this platform on the top of our institute's building, where we have an aerosol station which does measurements for ACTRIS. So the scientific focus of these measurements is that we have long-term observations, but that we also do some field campaigns where we maybe look at microplastic or other things which are not regular done by other stations. And also we have some space that we can do dedicated measurement campaigns depending on what we think is needed, and also invite people from somewhere to participate in those campaigns. And so it all costs a lot of money, and we were just lucky to learn that our station was also selected by the university as a so-called core facility. So they committed to provide one technician and one additional senior scientist, which is very smart, because without people you cannot run so many measurements. And so we are now part of the pan-European ACTRIS, or becoming part of the pan-European ACTRIS infrastructure. I don't know who knows ACTRIS. ACTRIS stands for Aerosol, Clouds and Trace Gases Research Infrastructure. This is all the ACTRIS stations which are around. It's not only Europe, it covers more. If we now zoom into Europe and into Austria, then you can see there's only 2 sites which do in situ aerosol in Austria. It's Sonnenblick Observatory, which belongs to Geosphere Austria, the Austrian Weather Service, and then our station here in Vienna. So with this, Sonnenblick being on a 3,000-meter high mountain, Vienna being in a 2 million, or Vienna being a 2 million inhabitants city, we have a big contrast with these 2 stations. So at least in winter, part of summer, Sonnenblick is in the free troposphere, and Vienna is the opposite, where you have many people and typical urban background. And so here I'm showing you some photographs. So we are really in the near vicinity. It's the highest building, so we have the flux coming straight to us, and it's not deviated by major buildings. And what you can see here, we have an ACTRIS PM2.5 inlet and an ACTRIS PM10 inlet. And a year ago, we started to do the regular ECOZ measurements, but also started to look at microplastics on filters, on these filters here, with this wet and dry deposition sampler. It's also looking at microplastics, and what I already can say, we do find, so we selected some random sample, 10 samples, and we do find microplastic on all of these samples. And there seems to be a correlation. If OC content is high, also microplastic concentration is high. But this is part of ongoing research, and we will present more of this at the EGU conference in April. So what can you do with such a station? We were very lucky because, as I said, there's more than 100 years of aerosol research in Vienna, and decades of measurements at the rooftop. And this is now a time series from 1984 till 2016, where for winter and summer, I show you the trend in the black carbon mass concentration. And you can see that there was a huge improvement. So a significant decline of the black carbon mass concentration, something like 88% in winter and 70% in summer. And also the differences between the seasons get less prevalent as we go on in time, which probably has to do that heating was changed. Not so many people are using coal anymore. And also improvement of filters in cars. And so I think here you can see the success of air quality legislation. And also if you look at the PM10, PM2.5 data, the concentration has been cut down by a factor of 2 since 2011, which I think is amazing. So the measurements stopped at 2016, and we reconvened recently. And so the red dots here are the new measurements, which we started last year. And you can see that the trend continues. And so we expect also in the future decreasing black carbon and EC mass concentration. And with this, I'm done with what I wanted to show you in terms of science. Now I would like to come to an advertisement. So every 2 years we have a summer school in Vienna. So it's called Summer School Basic Aerosol Science. And this year it's taking place from 8th till 15th July. And so if you want to have a 1 week all you need to know about aerosol physics class, then I invite you to go to our website and join our summer school. So we hope to welcome you in Vienna, many of you, and I think some people from Boulder went and enjoyed it last time. So in summary, I showed you 2 parts. The first part was about the A-Life campaign. We observed Saharan and Arabian dust in various types of mixtures. We systematically analyzed those mixtures, and first we divided the data set into these 4 main types, and altogether 12 subtype or 12 types. And we could show that the effect of pollution in the dust mixtures is visible in the size distribution. So as pollution increases, the effective diameter goes down. There is a significant change of all intensive optical properties with increasing pollution content. The scattering angstrom exponent, which is often used as a indicator to find dust periods in a measurement data set, changed from a dust signal with values of 0 to a pollution signal approaching values of 2. And in the second part of the talk, I showed you that we have this observatory built in the unique location in the middle of the town. And yeah, if you have a good idea where we could measure something together, we are happy that you approach us and do some cool stuff. And last but not least, I would like to invite you to come to Vienna to the summer school, but not only to the summer school. If you are in town, let me know, then come by and we chat about science or have a coffee or whatever. And so there is some publications out and in preparation to what I have shown to you. The cloud stuff is in the submission process here. Dolna et al. Will come out at ACP. And like the synthesis is being prepared for bumps, so we have to go through the process. And now I would like to thank you for your interest. I would like to thank all my team members. It's something you have to do as a team, which you never can achieve alone. And also here, all these campaigns which we have done together and will do together, it is always a lot of fun. And so I'm happy to take questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Bernadett.
So yeah, you alluded at one point to the important issue of whether the aerosols are internally or externally mixed.
Yeah.
And whether they're stuck together or whether it's just coexisting.
I think it's coexisting. This is what we see, at least there.
Okay.
I think if you go into the literature, they typically find what we find, but there is some studies in Asia where the black carbon is attached to the dust, and I think it depends also if you have like huge pollution concentration, then it's maybe more likely to get the stuff stick together. But what we see is more the external mixture.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions from the room? Christina?
Good throw. Thank you so much for the talk and congrats on your new lab. That's exciting. I'm curious, I'm excited about your cloud case. And I'm curious if you were able to look at the particle types that were activated into cloud droplets versus ones that were not. So like, did you see a sort of preferential activation of certain dust, or
we were so lucky because we have a sample where we have the chemical composition analysis in this red part of the flight. I don't know it from the top of my head, but I can dig out the paper, or maybe I even have it open so we can look at the plot. So this is the chemical composition of the particles sampled in the mineral dust layer, which was activated. And so there was carbon, there was 2% feldspar, illite, 7% kaolinite, something like 66% silicates.
And this was the interstitial aerosol, or the in
We,
cloud?
we were flying, and so inside the layer, so it was before we entered the cloud.
I see. Yeah.
It's not interstitial.
Okay.
It's with the aerosol without the cloud. But since it was coming from the same source, we claim that what we measured outside the cloud is also the composition of the particles inside the cloud. And this is really lucky that we had this sample just in this.
Did you dare to estimate INP concentrations from your
Yes.
measurements? Yeah. Okay.
Actually, we reached closure.
Oh, cool.
So hopefully we submit this in. So here is the relationship of cloud particles larger than 13 micron divided by the predicted IMP. And so it was quite amazing how things fitted together. And so
Cool.
I hope that you can see this paper really soon in ACPD.
Thanks.
All right. Boy, that's okay. It's half the fun of questions, right?
So kind of follow up from the previous one. You didn't measure hygroscopicity, am I right? Because
We did.
from the
We did. We had a CCN counter, but I did not show it there because I had
because from cloud physics point of view, that would be the other part, no INP, but how much of those aerosols can actually work as CCN? I mean, the Israeli long time ago were showing that there is quite often you get those dust, covered with some, sea salt or things like that, and that's the way that they can work as CCN. But that's probably you get more comprehensive data.
So we have a paper under review at EOL where we looked at the CCN properties of mineral dust which has been transported to the Caribbean. And we are showing that all the CCNs, it's not the dust, it's the pollution inside the dust layer which makes the CCN. So hopefully we will submit the revised version beginning of March, and then this comes out hopefully soon too.
Thank you. This was really interesting. Early on in your talk, you showed a plot that showed the probability of seeing a certain type of aerosol as a function of height. And I noticed it looked like there was some kind of striation going on there. And then you showed later that there was also a size correlation with different types of particles. Is that just, were those measurements taken kind of all in one go? Or was this just over the course of many months you found certain
No,
types?
that's all the measurements which we made during the campaign.
Okay.
And so this is not the probability you would find it. This is the distribution of different types in our data set.
Okay, yeah.
So we took all the measurements and all the data and then binned it and then looked for every altitude bin how much of our measurements at 4 kilometers is mineral dust. So 80% of the samples at 4 kilometers was mineral Saharan dust and then some Arabian dust. So it's not a probability you would expect from a model. It's what we measured in our data set.
Okay. But I guess my question is, like, you do actually see this striation, that there's certain types that are more present high up. So this was, and I think this is how it always happened. You typically have the Saharan dust above the Arabian dust. And I think this has to do with metrology, that the transport distance is shorter from Arabian deserts than from Saharan deserts, and so and also as it comes north and you go isentropic transport, then you get this kind of layering, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Great talk. I was curious if you could go a little bit into the various instruments that you used on board for the chemical composition and for the variable wavelength scattering and absorption and so on.
So we had CPCs to cover like the nucleation mode, and so we had a CPC starting at 5 nanometer and one at 10 nanometers. So this gives us the fraction between 5 and 10 nanometers. Then we had optical particle counters, which started at 100 nanometers to measure the size distribution inside the cabin. And then we had the CUPS instrument, which is also a stray light spectrometer plus an OAP, optical array probe, which measured the size distribution of aerosol particles and clouds outside the aircraft cabin. And so we did not use optical equivalent diameters. We really used me-theory to calculate the response of our instrument and then used this to get the size distribution. So what I show is geometric diameters. And so it's matched together all this data from these instruments. Then for black carbon mass, we had an SP2. For absorption, we had 2 Brechtel 3-color absorption photometers, which we run at the sideboard and the main inlet, but basically looked at the absorption from the total aerosol. Then we had an Aurora 4000 nephelometer, which we used to look at the total scattering, but also at 10, 20, and 50, so several angles to get the phase function of the aerosol. What else? We had impactors where we collected the particles. So we opened the impactors depending on what we decided in flight, and for 5 or 10 minutes. So when I was on the plane, I looked at concentration and I thought, okay, this should be enough, and then made sure that So we had the flight patterns like in steps, so that you don't compare the data from different altitudes, but get statistics. And there we collected the impactor samples. And then we had a wind lidar looking downward, which is also utilized in this cloud study. We could really see that there were waves. So it's really a really cool case, I think. And then there were meteorological measurements, wind, temperature, pressure, humidity.
And the chemical composition?
Was just the impactor samples, so there was no space for a mass spectrometer. Yeah.
Just a simple question. You mentioned briefly back trajectories calculated every second.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if the back trajectories could characterize the aerosols and if it agreed with your characterization of the
That's
aerosols.
actually a very good point. I will ask Petra Seibert if she can do it for my BUMS paper, that we compare what we measured and what you would expect.
Yeah, I'm just curious if the back trajectories of the models
We have done some statistics because as we were told, you cannot fly here and you cannot fly here and you cannot fly here. I was like, and so we did some statistical analysis, which airports we should. So the idea was to go to airports and then hopefully sample what we wanted to sample. And from this, we have some statistical analysis, but not like this.
Let's thank Bernadett one more time.